Be there for me, I'll be there for you.
Riverton Park United Methodist Church is more than just a Sunday ministry.
I love you.
It's a 24/7 sanctuary and campground for the homeless in Tukwila, just a few miles outside of Seattle.
We need housing for these folks. We need them to not be in tents.
And now Pastor Jan Bolerjack is being challenged to show even more grace and generosity to those in need.
They somehow get this phone number, this address, and they show up here.
Along with the homeless already here, nearly 400 migrants
I've gotten calls from the southern border.
are now staying in tents and makeshift shelters. Are the homeless and the migrants getting along?
Takes effort, but yes.
Almost all the men, women, and children are from Venezuela or Angola, and they barely speak English.
Parlez-vous français?
Oui, français.
Only français, okay.
And they've been here for almost a year.
They're kids, they're sweeping, there's so much going on.
There is. Aren't they beautiful?
When the pastor recently gave me a tour, it felt like controlled chaos. Most of the kids have cell phones and pass the time playing video games.
Aquí estamos aburridos.
The church kitchen is constantly being used.
Fufu. No fufu, this bread, okay.
Bolerjack says they have official papers to temporarily stay in the U.S. while seeking asylum.
There are men and women who are jumping over with kids who don't have paperwork either.
I don't know about them. I don't have them here.
Complicating matters, in some cases, there's a 2-year backlog to get cases heard in immigration court.
We can't take any more.
But she's refusing to turn people away.
If a family shows up, standing at my door, we take them.
But even with all the goodwill, the emerging problems are hard to ignore. I've obtained police records showing more than 100 dispatch calls to the church in the past year.
I do have a problem with that.
Incidents include responses for rape, 3 suicides, burglaries, auto theft, unwanted subjects on the property, harassment, lewd conduct, and vandalism. This is exclusive video showing a series of fights and arguments happening inside the church, and clashes over cultural differences between the Angolans and Venezuelans are now a regular occurrence. This woman who goes by Maria stays in a tent and wanted me to hide her identity.
No nos sentimos a salvo.
When we try to report or something, any problem, they don't take our case.
She says there are even more problematic incidents, but church staff members are pressuring them not to speak up.
So do you feel like the pastor's trying to cover up the problems or downplay the problems?
Ella todos los días miércoles nos reúnen.
She is very clear and consistent, asking us to keep the problems low, deal with her only, don't call the police.
Pastor Bolerjack did not respond to these allegations after I left the church, so I asked Tukwila PD for a breakdown on exactly who's responsible for what, but that data was unavailable. I also reached out to UMC leaders at the regional level to get some answers, but no response there either.
No respect for personal property.
For neighbors who live near the church, they're losing patience with the lack of transparency.
Pastor Jan just keeps trying to smooth things over.
And say the situation is spiraling out of control. That's why Tukwila's mayor recently declared a state of emergency.
The number of people has really outstripped the resources of the church.
To access more regional support and funding for a crisis that pretty much caught everyone off guard.
No small organization can handle the numbers of people that we've seen.
Where are you from?
Venezuela.
While the church and private donors are financially supporting the situation on the ground, city leaders say this is stretching public schools and the already challenged homeless support system in the region. In fact, there are now complaints from advocates who say migrants are unfairly jumping ahead in line for housing at the expense of Americans living on the streets.
Are you getting any guidance or sense of when the migrants will end up moving out?
The flow seems to be continuing, and I think that is the challenge, that we need a more comprehensive solution.
A spokesperson for Governor Jay Inslee's office says they're aware of what's going on and also trying to help, but emphasized we haven't heard of other jurisdictions experiencing this same situation. But the reality is the crisis is spreading, and Bolerjack says other United Methodist churches in the area are trying to help. We've now learned 20 people from Riverton were recently bused to Highline United Methodist Church in Burien, just a few miles away.
If they pose any type of threat to the community, that's something that we all want to be aware of.
Brandon Lewis lives right next door to Highline and says he was never notified.
They're going to do what they can get away with.
Were you notified by Highline that the migrants were going to be brought here?
You know, I wasn't.
Burien City Council members Jimmy Mata and Stephanie Mora say this is concerning for their city.
Just seems very unplanned.
And the business community is preparing for the worst.
Respectfully, we have our own issues right now. I don't believe we're in a position to take on more.
Highline pastor Jenny Parch did not want to go on camera, but says the cap at her church is set at 30 people, and these families will only be allowed to stay until the end of November. This is not just a Washington state problem. A record number of migrants illegally crossed the southern border during the past few years. Many ended up in so-called sanctuary cities like New York and Chicago, where law enforcement may look the other way.
I believe we need to get more resources to welcome them.
There for me.
The pastors say there's no exact playbook to address this unprecedented crisis.
Well, I will let them stay until we have something better.
Their faith is clearly being tested more than ever.